Right, so we're gonna work off of the file that we built yesterday in the HTML, just to kind of demonstrate some of the CSS properties, and then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna try to build this very basic plotting your blocks. It was supposed to be a group activity, but I figured because today we're kind of a little behind schedule, I'm just gonna demo it for you guys here, so that we can save some time. Right. So after I'm done with this, you guys are free to work on the platform all the rest of the day, so there won't be any more interruptions. We'll just get everything out of the way in the morning. Right. So before we break today, make sure that you have the questions that you want answered, asked, right, regarding CSS. Right. So first things first, I opened up Atom. Right. So this is the HTML demo file that we made yesterday. I'm just going to drag that into Atom. Right. So here we have this index.html. Right. So yesterday, we kind of this is something that I was testing out yesterday to see if it worked. But yeah, so let's take a look at this file that we coded up yesterday. So if we open up Chrome and we drag this file into Chrome, we should see that this is the code that we wrote yesterday in the HTML demo. Right. So yesterday we actually touched on some CSS. Right. So today I'm going to show you guys the different ways that you can use CSS inside of your HTML. Right. So one way is to do it inline. Right. So this is the way we did it. This is how you would do it inline. All you need to do is just make an attribute within the tag that you're trying to target, and you literally give it the style attribute, and then just put the CSS between the quotation marks, and that'll give the CSS that styling. Okay. Another way you can do it is if you had a style tag inside of the head, and then once you have the style tag, you can put all of your CSS in between the style tag here. Right. So let's say that I have this div, and I want to, let's get rid of this guy, and I want to give this guy class. Okay. Let's say this class is the top headers. Okay. We can name this class whatever we want. Now we can also give something an ID. Let's say here we say ID equals to the biggest, or let's say big tag here. Okay, so a class is an attribute that you can give to any tag. Right, a tag is something that is like a div or h2 that has an opening and closing. Those are called tags. Each tag, in the opening part of it, you can give it attributes. So this is an attribute that I gave it called a class, and I gave it the name top headers. This is an attribute I gave it called the ID, and I named it big tag. It's a dumb name, but so the difference between classes and IDs is that both of these guys are used as selectors. So what that means is that once I give it a class, I can target that class or ID to style whatever it is that's between that tag. Okay, so it's used in the CSS to target everything that's in between this div, and it's used to target everything that's in between this h1 tag. Right? So the difference between classes and IDs is that IDs must be unique. So if I wanted to do this, let's say if I wanted to do that, it'll give me an error. Right? Or I mean, it might not break, but this is not allowed because IDs, they are used mainly for JavaScript. So if I wanted to write in my JavaScript, get the ID with this thing and do some stuff to it, if there's multiples of that, then the code doesn't know which one to get. Right? So IDs must be unique. Classes can be reused. So if I wanted to give this class to another div with the same class, that's okay. Right? This will save me some syntax in CSS by writing one class, giving it some styling, and just repeating that class for different parts to apply the same type of styling to different parts. Okay, So the way that we target classes inside of our CSS, we use the hashtag, or we use the dot, and then we write whatever it is, top headers with the curly brackets. And this is how we will target a class. The way we target IDs is with hashtags. Okay, hashtag, is it big tag here. Okay. So targeting IDs using dot before the name of the class, targeting IDs with the hashtag before whatever the name of the ID is. Right. So once we target this thing, we can give it some styles. Okay. So if we refresh the page right now, we should see that everything is black. There are no styles to it at all. But if I wanted to say give everything inside of this div a color red, I would do it here because I'm targeting top headers. So I'm going to give you a color of red. And if I refresh the page, oops, this has an S. All right, so it's very important that this, whatever you name the class, has to absolutely match what you write here in the CSS. Otherwise, you're not targeting that thing, right? So here, everything in that div is now red. I can give it different attributes, CSS attributes, right? There's many of them. You can do a lot of real cool things with CSS, but the basic stuff, we're kind of going to go over just like the colors and the different fonts and stuff. Okay, so for the big tag, for the ID, we can do the same thing, right? We're going to say color blue. Okay, so there we go. We got that guy to be blue. So there's different ways you can apply CSS to different parts of your code, and that's the way you do it, right? So likewise, if I had, like, say, a p tag in here, and I made some, lorem ipsum. Let's do this toggle soft wrap thing again, so we can see it. Okay, so there we go. This is another div with the same class. And I don't have to rewrite this. This same class is gonna be applied to both of these divs. All right, so now if I refresh, that's the second div with the same class. All right, so I can reuse the CSS attributes that I write up here. Now, this is the second way you would do CSS, right? So the first way was you write it inline, which is right in the HTML. Another way is putting a style tag in the head. And the most common way is to separate that into a separate file. So then you have a separation of concerns for one file to have only HTML and the other file only to have CSS. Okay, so the way we do that is I'm going to make this full screen. So up here on the HTML demo, I'm just going to right click on it. I'm going to make a new file and I'm going to name it style.css. It has to be of .csx extension. That's how the code, the Atom knows that it's a CSS file. Okay, so enter. So it just made that, and you can see over here on the left, we have index.html and we have style.css. Okay, so in Atom, you can simply just hold on and drag that to the side, and you'll see that this left side is this file, the right side is left side is this file, and right side is this file. So we want to have these CSS things inside of this file. So here, if it's a .css file, you can just start writing CSS right away. Right, so we can get rid of our style tag here and save both of these. Now if we refresh the page, the CSS styles are gone, right? Because it's not linked. This document doesn't know that this guy is supposed to apply styles to it, right? So the way we link this file to this HTML is using the link, right? And auto-completed, it said it's a style sheet. That's what we want. It gave me this href, which is like something default that for some reason Atom thinks that this is the convention. But for us, we just write the path. So in this case, the stuff that you learned with the terminal yesterday comes into play because we're using the same kind of syntax to find the path of this file. So right now I'm within the HTML demo folder because this file lives on the HTML demo folder. If I wanted to target style.css, what's the path for it? It's just style.css, right? Because it's in the same directory as me. Okay, so now if we have that and we refresh, we should see the styling be applied. Okay, so now that we've separated out the CSS file with the HTML file, we can just start writing our CSS in here and not worry about cluttering up this page, which is designed to just handle the HTMLs. Now we're gonna have to write our classes inside of the HTML, of course, but the CSS will be separated out into the CSS file. Okay, questions so far?
So the difference between class and ID identifies just specific
Yes.
line,
Yes.
and class is entire section.
No, they can both be lines or sections. They do exactly the same thing. The difference is that classes they can be reused. IDs cannot be reused and they have to be unique. That's one of the differences, the key differences. Okay, so I can replace this with an ID called top headers. And let's see what happens if I refresh the page here. See, this p tag is no longer styled. But if I do this, hashtag top headers, then I can give it color green, and it'll do the same thing to whatever it is, right? So these are used the same way. They do the same thing. They help you target whatever it is that you want to style. IDs cannot be repeated. Classes can be reused. Also, another thing is you should know that what if I do this? What if I give it a class, let's say, my cool class, like that, and I also give it an ID? What if I say, hey, I want the top headers to be green, but I also want my cool class to have a color of red?
Take the second ones. The second one's like in this case, it would be the class.
Okay, so you think it's going to be red? Let's take a look. It's green, right? That's another difference between classes and IDs, is that IDs have higher priority than the class. If you're going to style something using that ID, that style has more weight. That selector has more weight than the class selector. IDs are preferred over classes. Like if you give something color green in the ID and you give it something color red in the class, it'll always go with the one that you give it for the ID, right? So that's just something to know. Question?
This maybe are IDs any bigger than classes as far as file size or anything?
No. It's just some people like to write classes for a lot of things because they don't want to have the extra kind of confusion of worrying about, did I use that ID somewhere else? Because if you did, then it screws up even more things like in the JavaScript, right? So typically what I do, I really don't use IDs unless it's related to JavaScript, because then you might want to be able to make sure that thing that you're doing is unique, right? Yeah, question.
When is it required that you use an ID instead of a class? Like in H1, could you use class equals big tag, or do you have to use ID there?
You don't, they're interchangeable. You can use it anywhere. You can change this to a class, right? So that way, that'll be a class. So it's the same thing. It'll still be green. Oh, it'll still be blue, right? Yeah.
If you put the micro class in the p tag, is it still stays the same?
If I put this into the p tag, let's take a look. I think it's going to be red. Okay. So if the IDs and the classes are together, then the IDs are preferred. But if the class is separate and the ID is something from the parent, then I guess whatever is it's more specific to that p tag. It'll apply the style that's more specific.
Child is more priority.
Yes. The whatever styles you give to the child will take precedent over the inherited styles from the parent. Okay, that's a good question. Another thing I want to mention is the spans. A lot of you guys asked me about spans yesterday, right? So spans are used in CSS. So let's say that we have this paragraph here that's all red, but let's say I wanted to make this word here blue, right? So I cannot change, I cannot target this one word as it is now. There's no way I can style this one thing unless I give it something that I can select, right? So in this case, we give it a span tag, and that's what it's used. So span, and then I can say within the class of my cool class, within there, find all the spans and then make the color, let's say blue. Okay. Oops. I didn't save this guy. So there we go. So that's the one thing that I targeted, right? So using spans, you can target specific letters and words within chunks of text. Okay. Another thing that's very important is all of these tags come with default CSS. Okay, so a div has some default CSS. Every div has that. A p tag has some default CSS. Span tag has the same, right? So the thing that's most important though is something called the display property. Okay, so if you have something that is a display block, that means that whatever is next to it on the same line, it will push all of that and it'll consume the whole line. That is display block. Display inline block is that it will only use the space that it needs, and it can be a block, meaning that it can have like a margin and a width and a height, right? There's also the third thing called inline, which does not have the height and the width, but it only takes up the space that it needs, and it's always going to be inline. So something like a span, that is display inline. So when I made a span here, it just stayed where it was. It didn't occupy any extra space, right? So p tag is a display block, right? So how do I know that? What if I write a p tag within this p tag, like that, right? So if I do that, then it's a display block, so it's going to push everybody outside to the top and the bottom, right? So it's very easy for me to kind of, let's make a class, say like test, and let's say dot test, and this is a very good debugging technique that I recommend all of you do. In order to see the space that an element occupies, we can give it an outline. So 1 pixel dotted red, like that, and we can look at the space that this guy occupies, and as you can see, the p tag, it occupies this entire width, right? So that is display block. Now if I wanted to make this guy display inline block, then it won't occupy the full thing. See, it'll just occupy this part, and everything else will be allowed to move up, right? So that's the difference there. Now if I make it just inline, it would have been the same thing as if I had this span. It wouldn't change, right? Now notice that we have these, it's kind of a little push down. That's telling me that the p tag has that extra styling added to it as well, that the span doesn't have, right? The p tag has this extra little buffer on the top, which is like a top margin. Okay, so let's say margin, or let's say margin 0, or maybe it's not the margin, it's the,
P tag margin.
yeah, but we can set, let's say I think it's line height 0. Okay, it's not line height, but there's some kind of default property that the p tag gave us that put this little buffer here on the top. Okay, so if we get rid of the p tag, then we don't have this anymore, and everything else should be the same as before. Okay. Yeah, and it's also it's not good convention to put the same tag within itself. It kind of confuses things. I think that's also why it was kind of messing up. Okay, so let's see what else we have. Okay, so I think that's it for this part. Let's go into this demo where we make this plotting your blocks thing, and then as we're doing this, I'll talk more about the margins and the paddings and the stuff like that. Okay, so that's also a very important part of this. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and close this. Let's make a new folder. This one is blocks demo. Okay. So we're gonna drag this folder into Atom. All right, so we're working on this guy now. All right, and we're gonna, over here first thing we're gonna do, right click, new file. We're gonna make index.html. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to make style.css. Okay, and then we're going to make our basic HTML file here. We're gonna call this block demo, right? And then we're gonna run this. We're gonna open up this HTML file in here. Okay, so we have this blocks demo here that we're gonna try to build this blocks demo. Okay, so first things, we want a CSS to be on the side. We also want to make sure that we link it, right? So link, this guy is style.css. And over here, just to make sure that everything is connected properly, save that. We can say for the body, right? For this guy, I want the background color to be red, right? And if we refresh this, if it's red, that means the styles are connected, right? So we can get rid of this guy, and now we can continue on with our code, right? So we take a look at this picture. It looks like there's this gray box that is containing everything, right? So we always want to start with the outermost layer of everything that's, and we want to work our way inwards. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a div. We're going to call this the main wrapper. Okay, and then we're going to give this guy some styles. So how would I give it some styles? How would I target this guy? Main dash wrapper. Okay, so right now, let's give it a background color gray. Now, if I refresh the page, what would I see? Nope, there's nothing in there because it doesn't have a height and a width, right? We must give it a height, let's say 400, or rather, let's give it a min height. So the minimum height that you must occupy is 200 pixels. Now, if the stuff inside of you goes beyond that, it's gonna push it down more. So it's not like restrained to this fixed height. Now for the width though, we could make it a fixed width. So let's say we want it to be 1,000 pixels. Okay.
How much is the full page? How many pixels?
So that's 1,000. And I think if you do this, inspect, I think, let me see here. If we do that, we can see the pixel things on the top. So you can kind of drag it and see what the pixels are.
I have the hardest time measuring out pixels.
Yeah. Pixels, it's a little weird because it's kind of like a universal metric to define, the spaces on the browser, but then it also, like, people have different screen resolutions. Like this computer has like a Retina display, so there's more pixels on the screen, but you have to figure out a way to have a universal when people are designing the website to have it show universally, right? So,
But don't you have to hide here? You can not picture.
right, but it's gonna, because I did the min height here, it's gonna be automatically pushed down depending on how many blocks I have. So we're gonna see that in a minute. Okay, so okay, so let's make this let's give this guy a border. So we see we have this border that's like black, right? So let's give this guy a border, let's say 3 pixels, solid black, like that. And take a look at, okay, so now we have this border. Now, everything goes into our main container, our main wrapper. So the first things we want to make is these red blocks here, right? So let's go ahead and make our, well, I think there's different ways you can build this, right? I could, something I could do is make one big div over here and then put these 2 blocks in there and then have each of these rows as one big div and have these things in the inside be their children, right? That would make things a little easier for me to kind of to style it. But I think in the platform it does explain to you that it's preferred to have as few divs as you can get away with. Sometimes that actually causes more problems for you later on, because then you're like, oh, now I'm changing one thing, I've changed many things. Instead, if I had it all contained within a div, then I could target that div and change all of it at once. But for now, we're just going to try to make it as minimal divs as we can, okay? Because we're not going to worry about optimizing this for later. All right, so in this case, we're just going to make 2 boxes. We're going to make 2 divs, and they're going to be on the top here, okay? So it's going to be within the main wrapper. So the main wrapper is the parent. This div here is going to be red box. Okay, and also nothing is going to be inside of that div. So I'm going to put it on the same line, and also I'm just going to make a copy of it. So the red box will be on the top with the class, the same class. Okay, so here dot red box, we are going to give you a background color of red, and we're going to give you, let's say, a height of 200 pixels, and we're going to give you a width of, let's say, let's see, this looks like it's about 400 pixels. Let's say it's 400. Okay, this needs to be a colon. Oops. All right, there we go. So now if we refresh, we should see our red blocks. Okay, so what we can do to see it better is, let's say, let's give it an outline. Outline 5 pixels, dotted black, like that. Okay, so you see this, now I can see that the reason why it looks like a square rather than 2 of these blocks side by side is because divs by default are block elements. So therefore that div kind of pushed whatever was the rest of this line to the next line. So we want these guys to be on the same line. We need to change everything that's a red box to become a display inline block. Okay, so now once we do that, it'll be on the same line. And notice that the gray box kind of expanded as the blocks move down. That's why the min height kind of, it makes it dynamic. Okay, so now these 2 boxes are like that. We want to have it kind of pushed inwards, right? And it looks like everything in here with relative to the side of the gray box is pushed in a little bit. So we can give this guy a padding. The padding basically is like an attribute that pushes everything within that container inward. Okay, so for the gray box, the main wrapper, we can give it a padding of, let's say, 25 pixels all around. Okay, so now if we look at it, there we go, 25 all around. Now these guys still need to be kind of separated. We can have, let's see how we can do this. We can either use some math to get these guys the right width so that it looks like that. Or we can make we can do this. Let's say in the main wrapper, I want everything to be aligned for the center. So everything is like, it's like symmetric. Okay, so we can do text align center like that. Now these two guys will be aligned to the center, and all it is right now for me to do is just give it some margins in between them, right? So here we can say for the red box, I want you to have, or rather, I want this guy to have a margin right, and I want this guy to have a margin left, right? But I can't.
Like, because that class is the same class.
Right.
How would you specify like the two?
So we can give it another class. So this is the left red box. This is the right red box. So you can give things multiple classes by separating with the space. Question. I used outline because I wanted to see, I wanted to see the space that it occupied. Now later on I can use a border. The good thing with outlines is that it doesn't push anything else out of the way. So for example, if I made the outline 20 pixels, nothing would change, right? But if I made this a border, then it actually pushes things out of the way. And also outline starts at the outside and border starts at the inside. That's the difference. Okay, so here we can, as we can see on the picture, it looks like it has a black border, right? So we can get rid of the outline and just make it a border, but we can make it 3 pixels and we can make it solid. And then we'll have this guy, okay? We're gonna give the left, say dot left red block a margin margin right of, let's say 25 pixels, and then we're gonna make the right red block have a margin left of 25 pixels. So now these guys will be moved apart. Okay. So, question.
Would it be better to put it as an ID instead, since it's specifically for these red boxes, the red box?
You could do that. Just the way I like to do it, it's like muscle memory. I'm just like forced by habit to write everything as a class. You could do it as an ID. It wouldn't make any difference, but you would just have to target this using the ID syntax, and that's the only difference, right? Okay.
It's like a clean code.
Yeah, I mean,
Or,
well,
or even-
I don't think it really matters that much. I mean, later on when you start working for companies, every company will have their different preference for styles. So then you will just listen to how they do it and conform to the style that they want, right? Yeah. Cool, so now we have the blue box, which is a display block, just everything, right? So here, so another thing, rather than giving it a fixed width, right? I can give these guys a percentage, and the percentage will be relative to this parent, right? So here I can say, instead of the width of 400 pixels, maybe I want you to be 40%, right? So then it'll look okay, maybe 45%. There we go. So it looks 40% turned out was the same thing. So now it looks a little bit more proportional. Okay, question.
So is it better to use percents for everything because people use mobile
Yes.
devices?
If you're making it responsive, then more likely than not, you're gonna have to use percentages everywhere, right? But we're not gonna get into that right now. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, so for the blue block, this guy is just a div, and I'm gonna say blue box, nothing in div, so I can just put it on the same line. Now dot blue box, I am going to give you a width. By default, the width is 100%. So I don't have to do anything, it's 100% already. All I have to do is give it a height. I'm going to give it a height of 200 pixels. And I'm going to give you background color blue. Also, I'm going to give it this border, the same border that I gave the red one, which is a black border. Okay, so now let's save both of these and take a look at what we have. There you go. There's the blue box. Okay, so it looks like the red one is a little off, right? So maybe we want to give this guy maybe some extra, margins, so it pushes it further apart, right? Maybe a little more. This doesn't really matter, right? You're just trying to make it look as close to the thing as possible. And this is what's called pixel pushing. In CSS, a lot of this stuff happens, so you want to make it look exactly the same, right? So that's close enough for me, right? So it looks like everything is looking good except there's the space on top here, right? So I can either give this guy a margin top, or I can give this red blocks margin bottom, right? So what I can do, I can just give this guy, I can give the red boxes a margin bottom of 25 pixels, and then the blue box will be pushed down. Okay, so
Could you also use the HR or the BR command?
Um,
Space?
you want to avoid using HR and BR. Those were things that were kind of popular when CSS wasn't invented. So if you didn't have CSS and you wanted to have things on another line, then you would just put a BR in it to save you the having to do the CSS. But nowadays, it's kind of frowned upon to have BRs and HRs. HR, what that means is just it's a horizontal line, and it just makes a horizontal line, like that. Typically, you don't want to. You could do it, but it's not really. Nowadays, it's not really used that much. Okay, those are called like you're styling things from the HTML, which is not the separation of responsibility does not like that, right? Because you want to style things in the CSS, right? Okay, so moving on, right? We're just making 3 of these little orange boxes. So we're gonna make div, and it's yellow box like that. We're going to make 3 copies of it, right? So then you can go down here and say dot yellow box. We want you to have a width of, let's say, 30%, or maybe 28%, like that. And then we want the height to be 200 pixels, and background color and the border, right? So background color is going to be yellow. Border is going to be the same, right? If we take a look at what we have, it's display block. So we need to make these guys all display inline block, like that. So once we do that, they should be side by side, right? We can give this guy a margin bottom to push all 3 of these guys down. So for the blue box, I'm going to give you the same margin bottom, 25 pixels. And then we can just give these guys some space, right? So we can say for this box, or all we really need to target is this middle one, right? The middle one can push to the side, both of them, right? So this guy we're going to give you mid yellow, like that. And these names are just arbitrary. You can name it whatever you like, but typically you want to be more explicit with what you name it, right? So dot mid yellow, we're going to give you yes, margin. And so for these different properties, margin, border, padding, outline, these are the specific ones that target kind of the perimeter of these divs. There's always going to be 4 different sides that you can give the properties, right? Margin top, margin left, right, bottom. There's 3 different ways you can, there's 4 different ways you can assign them, right? So obviously, one of the ways is this, margin left, let's say 20, 30 pixels. Margin right, 30 pixels. Now let's take a look at what that gives us, right? So kind of pushed it to the side, right? Now another way I can do it, I'm gonna put this here so we have some space on the bottom to breathe. All right, so this is one way you can do it. I'm gonna comment this out. Another way you can do it is giving it just the name, right? So these four, we can do left, right, top, bottom, but there's also another selection here for this one, which is without anything at all, right? So if we're gonna target the margin without specifying the left, right, bottom, and the top, then we can give it either one value, which will then be applied to all four of the sides, right? So let's take a look. Right? So this guy has margin top, margin left, margin right, and margin bottom, all four sides, right? We can also give it two values, let's say 60 pixels here. So the first one will be applied to the top and the bottom. The second value you give it will be applied to the left and right. This is a shortcut, the shorthand of writing that, right? So take a look, there we go. Top and bottom, still 30, left and right is 60, okay? Yeah.
So for naming the yellow either yellow box, mid-yellow, yellow box.
Yeah.
So when you style that in CSS, the first CSS.yellow box
Yeah.
will style all of those, even the mid-yellow.
Yes. So this one, basically what you're saying is you're giving it two classes. So it's as if all of this stuff is combined into one class. Like everything that's in this class that's defined will get applied, the style will get applied to this div. Everything on this will get applied to that div as well. So it's like it's combination. Yeah.
When you made the chain margin 30 pixels, how come the left and the right box looked like they were pushed down than the middle box? Like if you revert it back. Oh, it's pushed down. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And actually that's a really good question, because the reason why this guy is on top and these guys are on bottom is because this one has a margin on the bottom, right? So this guy takes up more vertical space than these two guys. And the reason why these guys are kind of on the bottom and not the top is because by default, when you make something vertical, when you make something display inline block, everything next to it is aligned, vertical aligned to the bottom, right? So if I wanted to change this, in addition to display inline block, I would have to write vertical align. By default, it's bottom, but I want to make it top, right? So if I do that, then these blocks should shift up, right? So it's a vertical align to the top most barriers, okay? That's a good question, yeah.
Can you go back to the code? So if you did margin, and then if you put 0 pixels and 60 pixels, then the top and bottom would have no margin,
Yep.
but then the left would have 60 pixels,
Yep.
correct?
And if you have 0, you don't have to write pixels.
Okay.
So therefore, it'll look like that. So 0, right? These guys default have 0, right? And I just wanted to show you guys real quick, 30 pixels here, 60, right? The last way I can give margins, if I give it two values, it's going to be top, bottom, left, right, right? And if I give it 4 values though, let's say 70 pixels and then 100 pixels, like that. So this will go clockwise. This will be top, this will be right, this will be bottom, and this will be left, right? So let's take a look at that. It's clockwise. It messed up the configuration, but this middle one has top, right, bottom, and then left. Those are the 4 values I gave it, right? So in this case, really all I want is that. I want 0 on the top and bottom, and then 60 pixels on the left and right. That will make my blocks look like they're positioned correctly, okay? More or less. So here, the last part of it, we're making this blue box, which is the same as the blue, the green one is the same as the blue one here. So we're gonna copy this one and put it down. Oops, what is this? There we go. So this one, I'm going to call it the green box. Okay, so in the green box, we're going to have all of the stuff that we had in the blue box, but we're going to give it a background color green. Okay, so now let's take a look at it. There we go, green box. Now these yellow ones are going to need a margin bottom, right? So we're going to give a margin bottom to these yellow ones. So there we go. And then in the green box, it looks like we have these purple ones, right? So there's a purple one here, purple one over there. Now, this gets a little tricky, right? And this is the part that is kind of like, it takes people a little while to kind of get used to, right? So the way that I want these purple boxes to, align is that I want this box to be aligned to the left. I want that box to be aligned to the right, right? So I can't really give it one thing in here to say text align left or text align right or center, because they're both going to be, I guess I can make it text align center and then just give it a huge kind of margin, a border in between, right? But I can also do it with different display properties, right? So first of all, let's do it the old-fashioned way. Let's do it the way that we know how to do it, right? So this will be a div. It's going to be purple. Right? These two are the same. Then I'm going to say dot purple. We're going to say your height is going to be, say, let's say 180 pixels, width 180 pixels, and your background color is going to be purple. Okay, so let's take a look. Their display block, right? Maybe we'll want to give it a border to see it. And we want to make it display inline block. All right, so now they're side by side over here. All right, so maybe we want to give this green guy a padding, right? So the green box, we can have padding, say padding top, or in case, let's do top and bottom. Top and bottom, we want 25 pixels padding. Left and right, we want, we can have 0, like that. So there we go, we got the padding. And the easiest way to do this would be to just give this guy, some style, give this guy a special style, and say dot left, we will give you margin right of, let's say, 300 pixels, and then dot right will give you margin left of 300 pixels, like that. Oops, didn't save this. Yeah, so it looks like, kind of looks like what we want. If we change this to maybe 290, it'll look more of like what we want, right? So that's one way we can do it. Question?
So what's the height of the blue box now?
The height of the blue box is whatever it was plus the padding.
So
Yes.
two height.
Yeah, so the padding increases the dimensions of whatever div it was, right? So if we get rid of this padding here, this guy is 200, right? So now if I give it a padding, yeah, because top and bottom will be 25. So this will be 250 now, okay? And that's something important to note as well. Margins and paddings actually increase the dimensions. Outlines don't do that. That's why we use outlines for debugging, because it doesn't change anything. Sometimes we want exact dimensions and it's perfect, and if we add a border or a margin or padding, it'll kind of mess it up, right? So we want to be careful with that when we use those. right? Just very quickly though, I want to mention position absolute, right, and position relative. So this is something that, you know, it's very powerful tool, especially once you get into more complex CSS stuff. You want things to be very, very precise, and you don't want one thing to mess up everything else, right? So right now what we have is everything is kind of like together on one page. If we change this box to like this wide, maybe it'll push everything down and it'll mess up all of the things, right? So sometimes we want our containers to be, you know, separated out from the entire layout, so wherever he moves, it doesn't mess up everything else on the page, right? So we do that using position absolute, right? So before we do that though, I want to show you guys position relative, because relative positioning is very simple, right? So let's say I want this left here to be position relative. Let's say once you give it a position relative, you can define a top, let's say 30 pixels, and let's say left 30 pixels, like that. You can also give it a right and a bottom, but normally you want two, which are the top or the bottom, and the left or the right. That'll give it that coordinate, okay? So if we take a look at this, save this guy, notice that our box kind of just, it moved to the left 30 pixels and to, you know, from the top 30 pixels. Okay, so this, it didn't change anything else except for the just itself. Okay, so what position relative does, it's saying that relative to where I am now, this is where I want to be relative to myself. And I'm not going to change everything, because every other element does not know about this relative positioning. It thinks I'm still at that original space. But to me, I'm going to make myself like, you know, relative to myself. So position relative doesn't mess up anything in relation to that element. It just moves that element, that relative positioning. So if you have everything set up perfectly and you say this one thing is like a little off, you can give it a position relative and move it like a little bit to kind of make that look good but not mess up everything else. And so that's position relative. Position absolute is something that is a little bit more, it's a little bit more abstract. So give it a position absolute, top 30 pixels, left 30 pixels. What do you think is going to happen on this page when I refresh it? Boom. It went up all the way to the top, right? So basically what this guy did was it took itself out of the entire layout. So everything else on this page doesn't know that this purple box exists anymore. Can't see it. So the purple box, no matter where it goes, it's not going to mess up anything here, but nobody can see it, right? So, and the top 30, left 30 that I gave it is relative to this window, right? It looks like it's relative to this window. Now, the thing with position absolute is that whenever you give an element position absolute, it's gonna, first thing it's gonna do, like let's say this guy, position absolute, right? The first thing it's gonna do is gonna look at its immediate parent. So this guy, the green box. So it's gonna check, is this green box position absolute or relative? Either one of those two. Does it have that position attribute? If not, it's gonna go back another level to the parent's parent, which in this case is the main wrapper, and it's going to check to see if this guy is position absolute or position relative. If not, then it's going to default to the window. Okay. Now in this case, nobody else is position absolute or relative, so it's going to default to the window. Now, if I wanted to make this, if I wanted to make the 30 to the top and the 30 to the left relative to this green box here, I'm going to have to give this green box position relative or absolute. But if I just want to give it that position for the sake of being the parent that reaches, you know, the top and the left, then I can just give it position relative because it won't change anything else. It literally will not change any of the styling, but it will make whatever is position absolute stop at that point and have these coordinates apply to that parent. Right? So right now it's the window. If I gave this green box here position relative. Now it's going to be relative to the green box, top 30, left 30. Okay? So the children can now be positioned absolutely within this box. So now I can do this with the right one. So let's say for the right one, I want to make you position absolute, and then top 30, right 30, right? So not the left anymore. So in this case, boom, it'll be top 30 and then right 30. Okay? In this case now we can get rid of these margins. These don't matter. We can also get rid of this display and unblock. That doesn't matter anymore. And this is all we need. Oops. Wait, what is that? Ah, yeah. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Right? So using that, you can position these things anywhere they want to within relative to this blue box. And if you don't want this blue box to be the box that you position relative to, you can make the gray box the one that it's relative to, the absolute to, right? Because if I take away this, guy, and I give it to the gray box, the main wrapper, then these purple boxes will be aligned according to the gray one, right? It's because it looks for the parent, the next parent that has position relative or absolute.
Did you give the green one relative or absolute?
Relative. Relative doesn't change itself. If you do this, relative, and you do top 30 pixels, left 30 pixels, then it changes it.
Okay.
Right? But if you say 0, then it's not going to change it. Right? So for everybody else, it still thinks the green box is where it was. The green box itself will move according to the relative position. If you don't give it anything, then position relative doesn't change the box at all. Right? It's where it is. Right? So it's been an hour, a little longer than we expected. Questions?
Really quick question.
Yeah.
The big introductory mentioned that it's not preferred to use divs. Is there any other way to do this without using divs?
No. I mean, you can make these things, like let's say I wanted to make the green box p tag. I can do it. I mean, I don't think it's not really gonna mess anything up, right? But I mean, I guess it kind of did. Yeah, you want to use divs. The reason is because that's what it's designed to do. It's a container, right? Unless you have other text that you would want to put into p tags inside of a div, then you would use the p tag. But if you're trying to like contain something and like position it, then the div is like the standard. That's what it's designed to do.
So div tags are used pretty extensively with CSS to contain like text or
Yeah.
images.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I'm gonna stop.